Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hey, I said it online and I'll say it here. New year, new mutants.
I love how relevant that's going to be in like May when this episode actually goes out. Welcome. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together. We've watched a horror movie. We talk about it. It's really that simple. And we are recording episodes way far in advance because Tim will be on paternity leave when you see this episode. In fact, hell, I mean, by the time this one goes out, he may actually be back starting to do new episodes again. But that's how far ahead we're planning here. So this last little batch of recording where we're doing these episodes, we're doing some 2020 movies that are kind of notable, that we feel that we should go back and do, even though by the time you see them they're going to be well into 2021. But we should cover these movies, and one such movie that was notable was Foxy's, although it's not Fox anymore. I was very disturbed by the opening logo, Tim. It was just 20th Century Studios. I was like, that looks weird.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Especially since the X-Men movies have always had like that thing where like the X like sort of stays there for like a second when it fades. Yeah. They couldn't do that this time because there was no X. It's funny. Anyway,
they could have kept the N in Century, but
for New Mutants.
Yeah.
Somehow I don't think that would have quite the same impact.
Okay, well, I'm just spitballing here.
I mean, I appreciate the effort, I do. But I don't think that would work. But anyway, so this is the spin-off to the X-Men movies that Fox were making, which was originally meant to come out, it was like April 2018, I want to say, was the original release date. Right. Yeah, and then it got pushed almost a full year, and then it got pushed like twice more, and I think we got to the point, maybe it was 2019 originally, but it got pushed like several times anyway, to the point where it became a running joke that like it was just going to keep getting pushed and pushed, and they claimed they were going to do reshoots, which never happened. All accounts say that they never actually reshot any material, even though that's why they originally delayed it a year. We'll get into some of the details on that, but eventually it came out in August of 2020, and it's really funny that Disney just, because at that point Disney now had control of all the Fox movies. It's funny how they said we'll just shut it out in theaters. This came out in theaters in the middle of the pandemic, because they just didn't care about it. It was just, no, let's just put this out. They delayed everything else. Everything else Disney were putting out that were big, they either delayed it. One or two things went to Disney Plus, of course, Mulan and Soul for Christmas, but everything else got pushed like a whole year. But New Mutants was like, just put it out. It's
fine. Why not?
We'll just go.
They have something to blame if it doesn't perform well.
Yes. But it's so weird because both this and Dark Phoenix, are
your favorite movies?
Shut up. I didn't see, like, those are two of the first like superhero movies or comic book movies in a long time that I didn't see as soon as they came out. They both kind of lingered for a while, and I saw them later. Dark Phoenix I saw maybe a few months ago. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I ended up watching that one on a plane.
Yeah. I can't believe they did the same story as X-Men The Last Stand and somehow made it worse. That's impressive. Yeah. But they pulled that off. But of course, this is notable, and it was interesting when they announced this movie because it was like, hey, this is going to be a horror movie. This is going to be a horror movie that's connected to the X-Men, which is why we're doing it on Screams After Midnight.
And I could be wrong, but I think at the time it was announced, did they say it was going to be R? I thought I remembered that it was supposed to be like an R-rated movie. I don't know, that could be wrong.
I think it was maybe going to be after the reshoots that they were going to like R it up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely not rated R in this iteration. There's one kind of bloody moment that's nice, but otherwise it's it's not a. I think there's one F-bomb, but that's your typical PG-13.
Oh yeah.
You know, and to be fair, they have used with the X-Men movies, like Wolverine typically has an F-bomb in almost every movie he's in, but just the one. Unless you're watching the unrated cut of the Wolverine, which had like a bunch of them, I think. But
oh jeez.
Yeah, so we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll get into it. I think the appeal of this movie, especially from the early trailers, was very much we're doing a Dream Warriors-esque movie. We've got a bunch of teenagers in a mental hospital. They're there for observation because of their mutant powers, and there's going to be some sort of supernatural entity for them to team up and fight.
which is a pretty good like selling point. I think that's definitely an interesting thing to do, especially like with these characters.
I love Dream Warriors, and I think you know, regardless of what I'm going to say about the movie or anything else we say for the rest of this episode, I do appreciate the idea of trying to do a different genre connected to one of these franchises. Because
totally. Yeah.
Really, more of them could be doing with trying things like this and having these different types of movies set in those worlds. So I appreciate that, if nothing else. So, but that's the basic premise. We follow 5 mutants who are all, you know, teenager-ish, age-ish years. I will say this is actually kind of interesting. It's one of the first comic book movies in a while where most of the characters I actually knew basically nothing about. Like Magic I'm familiar with because she's popped up in a lot of more modern X-Men stuff. But that's basically it. Like the rest of them I didn't really know. So I was kind of discovering what the powers were in the movie. There was a moment where I said, because I was watching this with chat on stream, and I said, wait, is Maisie Williams' character supposed to be Scottish? Because I think she's trying to do a Scottish accent. And yes, apparently the character is indeed Scottish in the comics. And for the record, her accent's not bad. Her accent's actually not bad, I thought. I thought that the Russian accent on Magic wavered a bit here or there. Whenever she shouted, I felt it sort of went out. And then similarly, I thought the sort of southern accent that the minor kid had, the guy from Stranger Things.
I'd say that was like straight up bad.
Yeah, he it felt like he was going from like a 6 to an 11, like, you know, back and forth constantly on that accent. It was weird. So that's your accent discussion for the. Anyway, we'll get into Tim.
Yeah.
After all this wait, and the fact that I don't think you'd seen this before either, right? This was the first time you watched it. Yeah. So
I honestly was tempted because like I wasn't gonna go to the theater, but they were showing this at like a drive-in. It wasn't like a real drive-in, but like they, I don't know, got like some inflatable screen or something they were doing like in a parking lot near me, and I was kind of tempted to go, but then just ended up. I'm
imagining the merchant from Resident Evil 4, some dodgy individual with a trench coat. Okay, I've put up a sheet. We're going to project a movie. Come and get it, strangers. What are you watching?
It's probably not that far off. So I was tempted, but then ultimately, especially once it got close to the release and like a lot of bad reviews started pouring in, I was like, yeah, no, I think I'm good. But it definitely was a bit of a roller coaster because when they first started announcing it and having the details, I did actually I was genuinely into it and excited for it, and I'm not like super familiar with the New Mutants. Actually, I have read like the Demon Bear saga, which, you know, this is based on, and a little bit of the, you know, Claremont stuff with it, but then I have read a lot of the newer series. Like there was you know, like they relaunched it like a couple of times, like, you know, over the last like 10 years or whatever, which there was one, not this current one, but the one before it I actually think was pretty good. That had Zeb Wells relaunched it, and then Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning did like a pretty good run that I think is solid. But yeah, like I never felt like I super like 100% like knew the characters, and it was funny because I read more of the newer stuff, but Danny Moonstar, she's like one of the mutants that got depowered like after like House of M. So she's still in New Mutants, but like as just like she's very badass and everything, but like, you know, she's basically like a human at that point. But then like, well, she gets like some Asgardian powers and stuff, I think at some point. But it was funny because I wasn't really sure what her power was because I mostly like knew her when she was depowered. So yeah, that was a kind of interesting thing, and I think I still have some questions exactly how they work. But regardless, I really do. I do generally like the characters, and I thought the cast was like, you know, really good. I mean, before I saw the movie, like just kind of seeing like, you know, some of the images and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's a great choice for this person, and yeah, they look, you know, I'm sure they'll kill it. And then it's kind of a roller coaster, because of all the delays. You know, it's usually never a good thing. And then once it did seem like it was coming out, you'd get excited again, and then you'd hear some bad things about it, and you're like, oof, no, that sounds like pretty bad. And then I think the final straw was around the time it was getting released. One of the co-creators of the characters, the artist, Bob, not sure how to pronounce his last name. I think McLeod. He had some like pretty scathing things to say. And
wait, is that why one of the characters is Scottish? Because someone's called McLeod, so I'm assuming he's also Scottish. Is that possible?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, like, you're familiar with like Claremont's like when he took over for X-Men, like part of his thing was like having like diverse characters and stuff. So when you get those like new characters like Colossus and like Nightcrawler and stuff, like, and Storm, and like, he wanted to have like different characters from all around the world, which very good, very like, especially for the time period, to be like, oh no, let's have like some diversity and stuff. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if when they were creating the New Mutants, maybe if he is Scottish, maybe he was like, hey, let's get a Scottish character in here. And what's funny is I actually was actually have read a lot of stuff with Rain in it, but not from New Mutants, because she was a character in Peter David's X Factor run for a long time. So again, like a character I'm like, oh, I'm very familiar with her, but not from New Mutants. But regardless though, so like I know he was upset about some stuff, about some like the casting choices, and then like I guess they misspelled his name in the credits, which is extremely shitty. Especially
I remember that. Now that you bring it up, I remember that just after it came out. Yeah.
And you think that would be like, not a hard thing to correct, like, especially like, with like streaming digital stuff. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's that big deal, but so regardless though, like, after hearing about a lot of that stuff, and then I feel like there were a lot of reviews that were saying like, oh my god, this is horrible, this is so bad, it's a dumpster fire, a train wreck, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, I was pretty deflated, but after watching it, my takeaway is just like, it's fine, I guess. Like, it's I definitely don't think it's like as bad as a lot of people are making out to be. Like, I mean, dear lord, I've seen a lot worse movies, definitely a lot worse comic book movies, definitely a lot worse X-Men movies, but it's not necessarily good.
So I came out of it kind of feeling like, first of all, Dark Phoenix was way worse. Dark Phoenix was a complete train wreck of a movie.
Without a doubt,
this is not that. This is almost surprising in that it's just kind of dull. Like, it's not...
Yeah.
Like, I think some of the character beats are solid enough, and some of the concepts are solid enough. I think the biggest problem the movie has, honestly, is that there's very little plot for like an hour. Of the 90 minutes the movie lasts, there's like very little plot in the first hour. Or more to the point, there's not much of a driving force to really propel anything forward. So I remember saying, as I was watching it, around the hour mark, there's an incident that happens. It's meant to like, sort of like, raise the tension, and okay, now we're getting into the third act. And I couldn't help but feel like, no, this is the end of an Act 1 thing. And yet it feels like we're only just getting to this part of the story. So it feels like it doesn't earn a lot of the big moments that it tries to play off in the ending. But it's a shame, because if I cared about the characters the way that I feel like I'm supposed to by the time I got to the end, I think I'd have been more into it, because some of the concepts are actually solid enough. There's a couple of cool moments that are fine. It's just a little bit dull, and it feels more like a pilot to a TV show than it does a movie.
That's a
for
good
most of
point,
for most of the runtime. Yeah, and part of that's because it's all set in one location, which I don't mind. I love a bottle story, I do, but it did feel kind of weird to me how there's like one doctor who kind of runs this building with the mutants in them. And there's never even like a conversation with someone from the outside. There's no staff. I'm like, I mean, there is kind of an answer when we kind of see some spoiler stuff, but like, it does, even with an answer as to how she's keeping them all in line on her own, it does feel kind of weird that there's just no one else. It was making me think a little bit like, and this is a bad comparison to make, but it was reminding me a little bit of Glass, and how Glass kept teasing something was going to go down in the city, but it ended up just being on the front lawn of the hospital. And this kind of had that in a weird way, where not that it was teasing something anywhere else, but it never really went anywhere, and everything that played out here, which again is fine. And if there was a propelled plot throughout where I was like continually caring more about the characters, that'd be great. Unfortunately, they're just too much of a blank slate. and the plot just has no momentum. And as a result, I was just kind of like, and yeah. Oh, this is kind of neat, I suppose, but
I found, I mean, I agree. I like movies that are in like, one setting, or like, like I think it's interesting when you have like characters that are kind of trapped in one place, but I found the setting to be so dull here. Like it felt like there was no life to it. Like it was just really boring, drab hallways and stuff. I hated like the, whatever you call it, kind of like the barrier stuff. Like whenever it'd be like, when like a shield would go up, or they would have like some computer monitoring stuff. I thought it looked so dumb and cheesy. So yeah, I really like. I mean, I don't know, that kind of bothered me. And then yeah, like something you were saying before about how like, yeah, it feels like it takes so long to kind of get going. Like it seems like they just kept kind of spinning the wheels. Like how many times do we have to have like a character go off, and then something happens to him that they're like, oh my god, you guys, like, I can't believe this happened. And then people are like, yeah, right. And then another character goes off and something happens to him, like, oh my god, I can't believe it. Yeah, right. Like there should have been like one kind of big inciting incident, and then like that brings everyone together, and then that kind of, yeah, like you were saying, like propels them forward to be like, all right, now like we're a team, let's get together and start it. And it feels really weird because like it seems like Danny is kind of the like introduction character, like she's like the newbie in here, but like you kind of get the sense that all the other characters have been here for a while, but it feels like they're still doing stuff to like get to know each other. Like they're still hanging out and being like, so what are you in here for? And it's like don't they really like already know all this?
Yeah,
and then, like,
I think they're trying to get across the idea that they're not very talkative to each other, or they're not open with each other, but it does give this weird impression of like, yeah, you're telling me these characters have been here for a while and know each other well, but they don't. It feels like they all just got here at the same time, even though the movie's not telling me that. I think one of the big character things with Danny though, or with Danny and Magic, right, is that Magic's just a complete bitch most of the movie, right? She's awful to everyone. She's kind of a bully. She's kind of all these things. She's very all this. Which, by the way, they never address the fact that she's actually Colossus's sister. That never comes up.
That's true.
Because that would be just a weird tangled web to deal with.
Yeah.
But I kept feeling, and there's kind of a moment in the third act where you think, okay, the moment where the team is completely together and united and bonded is the moment where Magic is going to like defend Danny, because all movies she's been like, turning it to shit. She's been calling her name. She's been mistreating her for no reason. Yeah. So the moment you show me that she's going to stick up, that even she's going to stick up for Danny, is the moment where the team feels united, and it's just kind of like ensemble cast 101, right? It's just the simple stuff, and I'm like, I'm a sucker for those moments. I'm a sucker for doing that when it's done well. So when the moment does kind of come, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, eventually they're kind of all on side by the end, it just doesn't really mean anything, and I kind of wish it did. And I think that comes back to the character beats just not feeling all that interesting or engaging, and there being no momentum through the story, so there's not actually that much of a journey beyond just, eventually she learns a little bit about her, and then there's a little bit back and forth, and then, yeah.
And then, like, one thing you kind of mentioned before, like when you were saying, like, yeah, it does kind of, they're trying to give you the impression that they don't really like talk to each other that much. I feel like that would be more okay if it felt like there were other people in this place, but it just seems like weird that it's like, all right, there's literally like, what, like 4 or 5 people here, and it's like, you are, even if like, you have problems and you don't really talk to each other, you feel like, at least out of boredom, like you would be, I don't know, more talkative or whatever. I don't know. I think ultimately it just comes down to it being kind of like dull and stuff. And I gotta admit, I did kind of like the like final kind of fight scene stuff.
No, it went for because part of what I was thinking throughout the movie is that maybe the reason why it's such a limited cast and why it's just the one building is because maybe this was a cheaper movie. It wasn't a big budget superhero movie. It kind of goes back to that joke in, I think it was Deadpool 2, how there's never anyone else in the mansion, just like the 1 or 2 C-listers.
Oh yeah. That's right.
But I mean, the movie does have money because the final battle. Because I was actually worried throughout the movie that Magic's powers are kind of like big and grandiose, and like when she really starts using them, it should feel like big epic stuff. And I was concerned that they were going to like cock tease it a little bit, but then never really give you a moment. And it went further with it than I thought it was going to. So I appreciate that. She even kind of had her "That's my secret, Cap, I'm always angry" moment. She literally almost has that exact scene. And it's an alright moment. Again, if I actually cared about the characters, it would have actually hit a lot more. But at least on its own, in a coolness level, it still kind of worked. So I was like, okay, alright.
Yeah.
Because something else I said is that, going back to this feeling like a TV pilot, if this was a TV pilot, I'd probably be a lot more positive and say, oh, there's a lot of potential here. Like, I have to have time to actually flesh out the characters, have time to flesh out some sort of ongoing plots. But because it's a movie, because it's a 90-something minute movie that's supposed to be a complete story, outside of some general kind of universe bait, which is never going to get followed up upon. I was actually surprised that it kind of followed up on a tease from the end of, I think it's the mid-credit scene from Apocalypse, teased something, and this movie kind of follows up on it a little bit, but only in the sense that it keeps the name going, so that presumably maybe in New Mutants 2 or whatever the next X-Men movie would be, they'd finally get to it. Obviously that's never happening now because everything's been scrapped. This was like just a relic of a different universe that came out late, but
if you're not like a comic book reader, it means absolutely nothing to you.
No. I mean, hell, even in Apocalypse, when the reference was made to this company that were dancing around, I was like, who? Like, I didn't know what it was when I saw it, because clearly I haven't read that era of X-Men that focused heavily on this thing, so or whatever. So but anyway, we should probably pivot the conversation into the horror side of things, because this is a horror movie. And before we get to spoilers, we should give some impressions on the horror nature of it. It is a horror movie, and it does have kind of a Dream Warriors-esque thing, because the stuff that happens to the individual characters, it's not quite dream stuff, but it is very, like, it's very Freddy Krueger in that something will show up supernaturally and it'll sort of prey upon their fears. That is there. It does kind of feel like few and far between early on. It gets properly horror. When it's Magic's turn, it gets proper full-on horror movie. And I actually thought the design of like her things, I don't want to spoil it, but those were actually a pretty cool design. It was very upside down man, I thought, from Justice League Dark. Yeah. A bit CG, but the design was cool. So fair play.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I would say I like the idea of a lot of the horror elements, but I feel like a lot of them ended up just being kind of that typical generic Hollywood kind of horror, where it just ultimately, amounts to some type of CGI thing jumping out at you, which, I don't know, I wasn't too crazy about. Like, I don't know if it was more like of a studio thing, but yeah, it just ultimately felt like pretty generic to me.
Yeah, I wasn't. This is the thing going into it, because I was expecting Dream Warriors. I wasn't necessarily wanting like good, scary movie or anything like that. I was more. What I was looking forward to, what I love about Dream Warriors, is them all like teaming together and trying to think of how to outsmart the bad guy, and like, and they're and again, without the build-up, so it doesn't really mean as much as it should, but there is kind of elements of that when they all start using their powers, when they've all been kind of like seared and holding back the whole movie. So, and that's like when it gets out of the horror almost and just becomes more of a superhero movie or a comic book movie, because it turns into big action stuff as opposed to the horror. I will say one of the other things that really fails miserably, I think, in this movie is the doctor lady who's looking after them, who may or may not have their best interests at heart. Like, she is such a dull, generic character, and everything that turns out to be going on with her is so predictable and obvious, and almost to the point where it doesn't even feel like it's supposed to be a reveal. It just kind of feels like, yeah. It's that time in the script for that now, I guess.
Yeah, she feels like such a non-character. Like, I don't know, it seems like the movie kind of forgets about her. Like, there'd be times where she'd pop up and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she's still supposed to be a present, in this movie.
Yeah, I think one of my growing kind of like criticisms of cinema these days, I suppose, to get big and bold, is just how bland a lot of movies are getting. Like, say what you want about bad movies in the 80s and 90s, but I feel like now when a movie's bad, it's bad because it's bland. Not because it's just like, you know, ill-advised or because they're idiots or whatever. At least there's a passion in some of the stupid movies that were made a long time ago.
I feel like that's like a big problem with the you know, these like billion-dollar, you know, franchise blockbuster properties. Like I mean, you know, people might kind of hate me for saying this, but like I love the Marvel movies. I'd say, you know, not everyone. Like there's some that I don't prefer, but there's but you know, I think they are really entertaining movies. But I also do think, like, in a way, they do kind of have like ruined like cinema, because you know, everything is trying to be that now, and you know, everything is like you know, like it just feels very like corporate, and hey, we're trying to build a shared universe, and hey, let's just CGI a bunch of stuff because it's easier. And yeah, like there is a lot of like lifelessness and blandness to movies nowadays.
Yeah, it feels a bit focus tested. Feels, you know, I mean, a lot of movies. This one, and I'm saying this specifically about New Mutants, it just lacks character. There is no character to this movie. It feels kind of lifeless, and like, I'll take a bad movie with life. Like that's what ultimately turns into usually a fun bad watch, is because you're like, well, they cared about this, and it ends up being kind of silly because they don't know what they're doing, but at least someone cared. There was a passion here. And yeah, and it's not to say that the director here isn't impassioned. Like Josh Boone, the director, like, you know, he talked it up a lot in the build up, and he did seem to really care. I just wonder if the studio system almost kind of like almost neuters people too much these days, because everything has to be mass marketable, everything has to be you know ticks all the boxes so that we can sell it to people.
Like I agree 100%. Like like everything is not like, I don't know, it feels like stuff is not that concerned about making a good movie as much as they are like a profitable movie. Like you know, it's like, yeah, who cares like what the director or writer thinks, because we have to make sure that this appeals to, you know, these demographics, and like, let's make sure that, you know, it's gonna do well in other countries, and like, you know, then you're not making like, you know, artistic decisions, you're making like corporate, you know, money making decisions, which, you know, is never good.
Yeah, it just leads back to this blandness, and I have heard the argument as well that part of the problem is a lot of writers and directors who are coming up now, they're all kind of like basing their skill, their craft on their love of movies they grew up with, which sounds like it's a fine thing, but it may be partially why we get this case of a director like this trying to do a Dream Warriors-esque movie, but because it's kind of based on a movie he already likes, as opposed to just being something that he has the idea for, it kind of feels like a neutered Dream Warriors, as opposed to you know, whatever level of quality it would be of its own thing.
Totally. I mean, like, you know, we're all inspired by, you know, the stuff we grew up with and the stuff we love, but yeah, there's definitely a difference between like, oh, I'm inspired by this, I'm going to take it and kind of shape it and make it my own thing, versus like, you know, some people that are just like, you know, I'm going to make the crappier version of it, which obviously not his intention, but you know what I mean? Like, it's, that's what it comes out as. It
kind of works out that way, yeah. Because I think it's more and more interesting to me when I hear that Christopher Nolan, like, one of his inspirations for The Dark Knight was Heat. And that's interesting because it's like a completely different movie. So, okay, well, yeah, what are you going to do with the Batman movie if your inspiration's Heat? And what do you get? You get those more intense shootouts with the Joker at the start, and it feels like it's a scene from Heat, but with the Joker. And it's like, oh, this is actually kind of, this works because it makes him feel really dangerous in the real world, as opposed to whatever, you know, it's doing something different with it. And the upcoming Batman movie, for example, looks like it's going to be like this ultra David Fincher-esque take on Batman, which again might really work for that character. It might, you know, give us some gold. It might not. It might fail, but
and again, like, you know, if I'm giving this movie credit, I just think, at least on paper, a lot of this stuff sounds like really good ideas. It's just
it does. I agree.
You know, and you know, and I don't know, maybe it's hard to say if the director's at fault, or if there was too much studio stuff, or, you know, if he didn't really have the, you know, he's like an up and coming director, and I think before this he had done like some kind of like YA, like romance kind of stuff.
He did The Fault in Our Stars.
Okay, so yeah, not the. I mean, I think like I've heard him on like some Josh Boone on like some podcasts and stuff, and he's definitely like a horror dude, and he loves he's a big Stephen King fan, which is I guess why he's doing The Stand and stuff now.
Yeah, that's what he's doing currently. He's the showrunner on The Stand. Yeah.
But I mean, before that though, just if you're just looking at his filmography, yeah, you wouldn't think like, all right, yeah, Fault in Our Stars. Of course, the next thing you do is like a dark horror comic book movie.
Yeah. It's funny because obviously we're talking about how sometimes the taking inspirations can be good, but sometimes it can just lead to this bland kind of thing where like some writers and directors are just kind of regurgitating things they like, so it ends up just feeling like a neutered version of something. And I'm not really sure what the answer to that is, but I definitely feel a lot of blandness in movies these days, and I feel like this kind of fits into that. It's not a complete disaster by any means. It's just a little bit bland, and I would probably never want to watch it again.
Yes, it'd probably have to be like a long time, like before I'd like want to check it out again.
I mean, I will say, like, knowing that there was supposed to be reshoots, and the reshoots were quoted as being to make it more of a horror movie. I can definitely see how you would do that, because the first hour is like, it's got a couple of moments, but it is quite slow. I can definitely see how you want to like try and build the tension quicker by having more horror stuff happen quicker. I can definitely see why they wanted to do that. Obviously, time moved on, the company, got sold to someone else. I also wonder as well, and I do genuinely think this may be a factor, is that all these actors are supposed to be playing teenagers, and by the time the reshoots were supposed to be happening, it was like 2 years since they'd shot the movie, and I do wonder like how much older do some of those actors look after a couple of years. Yeah. I mean, obviously they're all they're not quite as young as they're supposed to actually be, so they're not aging as quickly. But I do wonder, like someone like Maisie Williams, who does look quite young in this movie, like like would it be noticeable that how much they've all aged a little bit if you're going to be cutting between shots of like them in different scenes at different ages. I mean, would it be as bad as the wig from the Fantastic Four movie from Josh Trank's fabled film? I don't know, but
for sure.
I don't know. It is worth thinking about. But yeah, so I guess we'll get to spoilers then, so we can actually talk about the movie itself and plot and all that jazz. So to start off, though, I will tell you who our Patreon producers are and thank them kindly for being Patreon producers. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They are Patreon producers at the time of recording, which is notable because we are recording this very far in advance of when the episode goes out. But you can go and support us over at patreon.com/MailedFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month. And for that $1, you get access to the back catalogue of all the bonus episodes that we've done for Patreon. They're on pause right now while Tim's on paternity leave, but they'll all be back soon. But there is about 27-ish episodes in there you can go get. You also get bonus episodes of the sci-fi podcast that I did with Tara, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, and those are still ongoing. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. At the $5 tier, of course, you get early access to all the episodes of Screams by a day. And all stuff too. So go and have a look and see if you're interested in supporting all the content we make, Screams and otherwise, at MailedFuzz TV. And you can also do that, of course, by hitting the like button for free, which also does help a lot on YouTube. So please do.
Do we know, is Brett Williams, is he related to Maisie Williams at all, or?
I don't believe so. I could check. I could ask if you want.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe if he wants to write in and just let us know, because this would probably be a treat for him then if we're reviewing his like sister's movie or something.
Yes, thank you to Maisie's brother, who's one of our Patreon producers. But yeah, so full spoilers then for the New Mutants from this point forth. So let's just get out of the way, Tim. You know it's going to come up. So
of course.
So Tim tweeted out. Tim watched this, I think, on Friday, right, like the day before I did, give or take, and he just tweeted, "Oh, I hate when I'm watching something and I know there's a moment where Peter's going to want to talk about it for 20 minutes," and I just sort of chuckled. I was like, "Oh, whatever," not knowing what it would be referring to. And sometimes when Tim says something like that, like sometimes it's obvious when I watch the movie what he's talking about, and sometimes it isn't. Like sometimes I'm not sure what he's actually saying. But there's a moment in this movie where in the little rec room they've got, and the TV's on, where there's just scenes from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer playing, and I actually yelled out because it just cuts to it. And I'm like, yes! 10 out of 10! 10 out of 10, baby! But it was funny. What's actually funny about it, though, is that it happens twice, and both times the scenes they show of Buffy, which both of which are from season 4 of the show, both foreshadow something that's going to happen in the movie. To the point where I'm actually annoyed they didn't foreshadow something else, because there's actually another thing they could have foreshadowed from that same season, even though it would have put things out of order. Because the first time they're watching Buffy, it's a scene of Tara and Willow. I don't know if it's the first kiss, I can't remember exactly, but it's them being intimate. And it's actually a foreshadow because it's only a few scenes. Like, 'cause you've been getting kind of the chemistry between Game of Thrones girl and Dany. But it's after that scene where eventually they have this romantic moment where they're looking up at not the stars, they're looking up at the rain's hitting the force field that's over the building, and it's making all these little like light splashes, so it looks quite pretty. And they have this moment where they kiss, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a bit on the nose, but they literally foreshadowed this with the scenes of Buffy in the background. And then later on, the episode that's on is a very famous episode called Hush with the gentleman, which I don't think are that dissimilar to the monsters that show up from Magic's, Fears and Nightmares. So I thought, okay, that's neat. Now, admittedly, this is earlier in the season, but there's an episode in season 4 of Buffy called Pangs, the Thanksgiving episode, where part of what's happening is anything. Who is it that keeps? I think anything anyone says like becomes real. So because it's something that Jill says makes a bear show up, and Spike, who's tied to a chair, yells, "You made a bear! Undo it! Undo it!" And they're scared of the bear. And I couldn't help but think that given that this movie, the entire third act is that the demon bear, which is Danny's fear, this giant demon bear shows up, which didn't look too bad, admittedly, effects-wise. I thought it looked alright.
I thought it was alright, yeah.
But I thought, you could have foreshadowed that. There's literally a scene where someone makes an imaginary bear come true. What are you doing? Come on, movie. But yes, there are multiple scenes from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the New Mutants, so they're trying their best to make it better. Bless them.
That was that was interesting because like I definitely understood like the Hush thing, and I think I even kind of rolled my eyes a little bit because like it is a little on the nose, but I didn't really but I didn't think about it until you mentioned like the first clip. I didn't even realize that was foreshadowing what was gonna happen. I mean I love Buffy and stuff. I do feel like this was like a little too distracting. Like you could have just had it like on in the background versus like it felt like the movie was like, hey, look at this. But
this maybe comes back to what we were saying earlier, where Josh Boone's determined to like show that he loves Buffy by having Buffy playing, but it's almost like distracting, or it's almost too much, and instead of actually putting that effort into making his movie better, it's like, hey, look, I love Buffy.
And then I could be wrong. I don't know if you noticed this, but like the it's kind of playing on like this like little entertainment center, and I think they actually had like the DVDs next to it.
I never noticed the boxes, but you're probably right. They probably did.
Yeah. Just because I remember those like big chunky box sets, that they used to have for Buffy.
Yeah, the UK ones were much nicer. The UK ones came in like they were like little books, like little Bible sort of looking things, and they looked really nice.
Oh, that sounds cool.
They look much classier.
Yeah. And then the one other thing I would kind of say to it is maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it is kind of a nice reference because you have here's this Joss Whedon show, and then Joss Whedon notably did a very nice run on X-Men, which I don't think really featured any of these characters, but
I never thought of that sort of almost Kevin Bacon-esque step, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah, it might even be an intentional thing. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I like seeing it. I can say it is a bit on the nose, but both foreshadowing elements are on the nose. But it was there. I think because the horror elements, because obviously we kind of suspect that it's Dany's power, because Dany doesn't know what her power is, right? And we suspect that her power, and you maybe even knew what her power was because you'd maybe encountered her before in the comics, but
I think I had like a vague notion, but I wasn't
Yeah.
like, yeah.
But the idea is that her power is like basically making everyone else's worst fears come true. So, the other characters are experiencing things, and so you've got this sort of the douchebag guy who thinks he's hot stuff, and he literally is in many ways because he turns into like a molten rock person with super strength. To the point where at one point he turns into his molten version in the pool, and when everyone comes in and he's turning back, the water level in the pool's like halved because the top half's all evaporated with steam. That was a nice touch, I thought.
Yeah, no, I get like the whole turning into flames and stuff. Like I get that superpower, but like how does that also give you super strength? It doesn't seem like,
because I think he's turned into like volcanic rock, so I think the rock's just strong.
Okay.
Like that's all I got for you there. What else do you want? Because he basically killed his girlfriend. We find out later that was his big.
Well, this was something that bothered me. They basically all had the same backstory. It was
yeah.
My powers manifested and I killed my dad. Well, my powers manifested and I killed my girlfriend. Well, my powers manifested and I killed my dad too. Like it's like, Jesus, come on.
Yeah, it's just basically. I mean, I think it's the way it's framed. See if you frame this as no, this hospital's for mutants whose discovery of their powers all resulted in someone's life being taken. If that was just said at the start of the movie, I don't think that'd be a problem. I think it'd be like, oh no, that's what this hospital is. This is people who, when their mutant powers activated, it resulted in a death. So this is a special place for those people. But because it sort of slowly reveals all of them over the course of the movie, it's like, oh, okay. It's all this.
It treats it like each time it's like a big revelation or something. But it's like, all right, well, we've heard these. Same like revelations like from each person so far. So I agree. Yeah, if they would have done it like during their group therapy talk or something at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the purpose of this place, is that this is all mutants who killed someone by accident when they triggered their powers for the first time, that'd be fine. But so yeah, we should probably go through them and sort of A, what their powers are, B, what their worst fear is, and that's their section of the movie. So
a quick question. I wasn't really sure. I mean, I don't know if you got a better handle on it, but Danny's power kind of confused me because I wasn't sure if it's like, all right, is she manifesting like actual like stuff from their past that they're afraid of, or like does it have to be like a real fear, or can she just make anything up? Like, oh yeah, I'm afraid of like weird scary goblins, so here's weird scary goblins, or does it have to be kind of like,
I mean, I think
traumatic memories? I don't know.
Well, I think the demon bear answers that, because that's definitely not real. So I don't think it has to be a real thing. I think in some cases their worst fear is related to a real thing, so it's like replaying that or adding to it. But in some cases it's like more of just a monster or something. Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if it was more like like past memories or because I guess like you said, they have kind of like, some of them are rooted in like real life stuff that happened to them, but then some are just like, oh yeah, big crazy demon thing.
Yeah, we'll mention the hothead first because just because we mentioned most of his already, but he killed his girlfriend when his powers initiated, so he's having a romantic scene with Magic, who's not really there, because the sort of little twist for this scene is that she's still in solitary, so this was never really her. This was just another fire monster, I guess. This was like his own inner monster tricking him into things. That felt a bit of a stretch, a bit of a horror movie stretch, but whatever. So, and this is kind of the thing where he starts to believe that there is something going on in the building, because when Magic shows up and she's like confused, like, what's going on? I wasn't here. There's no one else here. You're alone in the pool. So that was his. Not much to it.
So he's in the comics, he's Sunspot, and I would think it would have been I wish they kind of like would have like played him up a bit more, because like with his character, he is like extremely rich, and he is very like well,
you can tell that in the movie, Tim, because he's got those very expensive Beats headphones on when he's doing the dishes.
Of course. And like I think that's something like I wish they kind of would have played up a bit more, because like you said, it's like Dream Warriors, but it does feel like they are kind of trying to do like an 80s ensemble, like Breakfast Club kind of thing, where he's like this kind of womanizing jock, and like Ileana's like the bully and stuff, but it just feels very one note, and like I feel like you don't really spend enough time with the characters. I would have liked to seen like some of these dynamics kind of play out a bit more.
Yeah. So that was his. Rhaenys, Game of Thrones girl. she her thing is obviously she turns into a wolf. That's her power. And we see her running around a few times as a wolf. She seems to have one of the best handles on her power because she's using her power freely from the start of the movie, basically. Whereas everyone else is scared to use their power, or they're testing it or whatever. Because none of them even know what Sunspot's power is. That's like a reveal when he starts like using that later on. But her thing is that she was branded, as we find out, by a priest where she came from, presumably for being gay, I would guess. Before we found out either of those things, though, there was a scene with her that unintentionally made me laugh my ass off. There's a scene where she goes to confessional, and there's no one there to listen to her confess, but she goes to the confessional in like the church that's next to the building, I guess. And what made me laugh though is it cuts away to another scene, and other stuff is happening. I don't even remember what the other scene was that it cut away to. But it cut back to her in the confessional, and the first line she said was, "I masturbated twice." And I just, for some reason, that just broke me. I just started laughing that she was confessing that she masturbated twice. Which, in turn, later on, when she then kisses Danny, I was like, oh, maybe this is why she masturbated twice, because she's been getting friendly with Danny, and the mood's been striking. There's a bit of a flirtation. That makes sense, but the moment on its own made me laugh because she was confessing this.
It does kind of make it a little creepy though when you realize like she was watching her in the vents earlier on.
She was, yeah. She was crawling around the vents and watching her in bed.
No,
yeah.
The one thing I'm kind of I wish they would have explored more too is like again, like one of the big defining things of her character in the comics is that she is super Catholic. Like she is so goddamn Catholic, and you do get this in the movie. That's why she's in confessional, and like her fear is like that, priest and stuff. But I think if they are gonna make her like have like a relationship with Danny and be attracted to her, I think that's like a very interesting character thing to add. But I think it would have been more interesting though to explore how she like regulates that with her Catholic.
Yeah, no, because I thought they were going to go down that path. Like, okay, so she has this guilt because she's clearly gay or bisexual or whatever, but she's attracted to a woman, and she's super Catholic. So how do those two things meet? How do those two things collide? And the movie basically never even brings it up or questions it. In fact, if anything, after the kiss, once we're down that path, it feels like the only way our Catholicism was ever brought up is the fact that when her nightmare thing happens and it materializes, is this priest with these big branding iron shows up in the shower and brands her again. But there's never like a struggle for her where she feels. I mean, I think the scene where she goes to confessions is supposed to show that she is feeling guilty about the feelings she's having, perhaps, but it never really follows up on it or does anything with it. So that's kind of a shame. Again, that's what's a character dynamic that is lost, a character arc that is perhaps lost throughout the script writing phase. The Maynard kid, Stranger Things kid,
Cannonball.
There you go, Cannonball. I mean, his power looks fine.
Sam Guthrie.
He it looks good. It's kind of like super speed, but of course it's like a burst of energy when he does it. So it's kind of like a cannonball basically. It's like a I'll give the movie credit because I feel like some lesser directors might have had the temptation to put Miley Cyrus wrecking ball in one of his scenes.
Sure.
When he came bursting through a wall or something.
Yeah, I feel like I wasn't super into like how his powers manifested. I think by the end I was like, all right, I guess that's fine. In the comic book, I think it does look more like a rocket, like like almost like his bottom half is just like a fire engine or something, but like or I mean just like a jet engine with like fire coming out or something like. But I guess that is pretty like hard to display on films. So they do the best they could. And one thing that we didn't really mention that much, I suppose, is on top of like the very obvious horror stuff they have here, there is also kind of like a level of body horror it seems like they're trying to kind of like display with their powers. Like obviously with Sunspots, like okay, yeah, you're when you turn into fire, it's like no one can touch you and stuff. And then like with Cannonball, they're kind of saying like yeah, he can like fly around like a cannonball, but then when he lands, he like really like hurts himself, and he has like a cast throughout the whole movie and like a black eye and stuff.
Yeah. And then of course you have like the Rain, like a couple of points, like they sort of gave up on her turning into a full wolf. She just sort of half turns, so she's got a little bit of fur and some claws. And I was like, yeah, they're doing kind of some Wolfman-esque stuff with her, so that, which is fine. Like, if you're going to give me like almost like again a bit of a Universal Monsters vibe to some of these characters, that's also kind of cool. Mixing that with Dream Warriors is fine. Like, I have no problem with that. Magic, of course, is the most powerful and the most interesting in terms of powers because,
without a doubt,
she can literally teleport to like essentially her own made-up hell dimension. She has a dragon puppet, which kind of becomes real when she goes there.
Lockheed.
Yeah, and she has, of course, her big sword that kind of forms, and she is super powerful. And she has that moment where, and again, this is kind of the big thing where I was talking about how like her standing up for the other characters should be a big, like, okay, they're united. Like even the bully bitch characters, doing the right thing when they're trying to stall for time to try and help Danny. And the portal opens and she kind of turns and says something, because she says, hey, whatever Danny's doing to us, it's magic, you can't fight it. And she turns and goes, I'm magic too.
Yeah.
Like it's the Hulk moment from Avengers, but she's got her big sword out and then she jumps out of the portal. Like it's kind of okay and cool on its own, but it would be really great if I cared about these characters, see if this was a moment where I was like, yeah, totally. F yeah, she's going to help her. F yeah, she's going to fight for Danny. Because you could argue that she might at first say, no, let's just kill Danny because it's her fault this is all happening to us, because her powers are what's doing it. If we just kill Danny, then it's all fine. Because that's what Dr. Lady's trying to do. Dr. Lady's trying to kill her because basically the Essex Corporation, which she works for, which, by the way, did you think it was weird how by the end of this movie they've wrecked the entire building, the Dr. Lady's dead, there's been this giant fight, and like no cars or helicopters come to like address the situation.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's a little strange
without paying attention to them. That's weird.
And I'm assuming like she's talking to like a computer throughout the whole thing, which I think if we're assuming that she's probably talking to someone at Essex, maybe even Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister himself, but you think they would have constant contact with the Institute, and then once it goes offline there'd probably be some type of like bells going off that like, oh, okay, maybe we should go contain this or see what's up.
Some kind of protocol, but there doesn't seem to be any, which feels kind of weird. But so yeah, Danny's the cause of it all. Like whenever she sleeps or whenever I think it's usually when she's sleeping that basically someone's nightmares happen or whatever. Eventually, Dr. Lady wants to kill her, and this is where I get frustrated because, like I say, there's a lot of potential here where having these misfits all kind of like stick together and saying, no, you can't kill her, we're not going to let you because she doesn't deserve to die for this. She has to just learn to control her power, and that's the end of it. I did enjoy her death though, because basically because the Dr. Lady has this sort of like force field power, right? And she has all 5 of them in their own little force fields, and Danny's unconscious, and she's like this, like, we have to kill her. By this point, they've all realized that she's willing to kill Danny. They've tried to stop her. He said, no, we're going to have to kill her. She's too dangerous. But Danny's basically in a coma at this point, because that's kind of part of this last chunk, is that Rain's trying to wake her up, and Danny's like in her own like snow field. Because the start of the movie is a flashback to when Danny... It also is a storm that kills her dad and everyone in her little village or reserve. But the actual reveal is that her powers did it. Like her demon bear that she conjured up killed everyone. Again, the same thing as everyone else. Her power killed those closest to her, and in some cases an entire group of people. But I did kind of pop a little bit when like the demon bear, this giant demon bear, just like jumps in the side of the building and grabs the doctor and kills her. Like I was like, you know what, that was a fun moment.
Yeah, no, I was really surprised at how effective I thought the demon bear was, because like on paper it's a very comic booky thing. It seems like it'd be hard to translate to movies, and I feel like most movies, like a lot of times, would probably just find some shortcut where it's like you just see this kind of like shadow of a bear or something, and then it's like a regular person or something. But no, they actually like went like full like, oh no, this is the demon bear. And I think like, I wouldn't say it's like the best CGI ever, but I thought it looked pretty reasonably good.
It wasn't embarrassing.
I didn't think it looked bad.
Yeah, it wasn't embarrassing. This is where I get really frustrated with the movie, though, because like you said earlier, the final action scene is not bad, and if I'd cared about these characters more, I think a lot of these moments would hit really well, because you have beats where, okay, Magic's the main sort of big gun who's fighting this bear and is, you know, jumping through portals and blocking things with a sword, but you have moments where the others are like, okay, they're getting close to Danny who's asleep, I have to defend her, so you have a moment where Cannonball will use his power, and then, you know, Sunspot's a bit more cowardly, but he eventually says, "Oh, screw this," and he gets ready. He moltens up and he's ready to fight. And all this stuff with them fighting for Danny, she's asleep, just in time for her to wake up at the very end and kind of, you know, solve it basically. All this fighting's going on. Like this final act on its own is actually perfectly fine. If the rest of the movie was better and making me care about these relationships and these characters, this final act would be a fine third act. And then the movie would be actually quite good. And I think because I can see the potential in all this, it does make it a little frustrating beyond just being dull. Because it is a dull movie. The first hour of this movie's dull. It's boring. It got to the point where I'm like, okay, we're 40 minutes in and we're still not really propelling anything. You know, it doesn't really feel like we're in Act 2 yet. We're not really, there's no drive to do something. You know? Which is a big problem in direction. A big part of movie making is making sure that momentum, that feeling of momentum is there, and you care about it moving forward. It just feels like it's sitting around killing time. When they go up to the little hideout that they always go to, apparently, to use a lie detector, but they ask questions that you feel like they would have asked each other, like, ages ago.
Yeah, that was, like, a really weird scene. I didn't really... I mean, I get, like, the... structure wise what the point of it is, because it's a way to, you know, reveal information to the audience about the character, but like I don't, it just doesn't seem like something like, all right, why is this like the fun thing to do? You know? Yeah,
well, I mean, because they hook up Sunspot, who's always bragging about being like a ladies' man, and they ask him like how many girls he's been with, and I'm like, wait, you waited till now to ask the guy who always brags about girls to like admit how many he's been with? Like, it just feels like, no, you'd have asked that, like, the first time you did this. Maybe the second, that push.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like something that... Like, I could see maybe you discover the machine and then, like, you use it once, but, like, yeah, after using it once, like, you feel like you would get out all the stuff you wanted to know. Like, they're coming up here, like, every night to do this? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a whole sequence where they like magic drugs, like she spikes the doctor's drink so they can just do what they want for the night, and that's when the pill stuff happens. Although it's not really magic actually, now that I think about it, because that is when the pill stuff happens, right? It's that night, I think so. So it's not even magic that really did it. Technically, it was Danny's version of magic.
Yeah,
in a weird way. Okay, whatever.
That's why I think like the powers are kind of confusing, because it's like, all right, so. I guess like his fear would be like, you know, being intimate with someone and then, you know, not handling it, but the way they manifest it is like with magic.
The idea that this doppelganger of magic's been around for, but at this point, by the time this happens in the pill, at least a couple hours she's been around talking to them and interacting with them, which is kind of weird. It's kind of a weird concept.
But like I feel like a lot of these scenes, like like in the attic, or when they're, you know, like hanging out after the doctor passes out, like I feel like these are the scenes where you're supposed to like feel them bonding and getting to know them as characters, but like you said, it's just so dull. Like I don't know, it's not like, this should be where you're starting to feel for these characters, and it just feels like kind of bland and I don't know, just very like trite stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no. I need some of that Breakfast Club poppiness. I need some of that. I don't know, Dream Warriors, like, you know, I hate to say cartoonishness, but yeah, I mean, there's an art to like making these characters likable quickly and making them feel like they've got some life in them.
One thing I did kind of like is when they were like, you know, talking about like, oh, who do you think like the boss is, and they're like, oh, isn't it obvious? Like, we're gonna be X-Men. Like, yeah, they're training us to be, you know, a part of that. Like, I just like that kind of like nod to like, oh, hey, yeah, this does exist in the same universe, and it would make sense. Like, oh yeah, yeah, people know who the X-Men are and stuff.
Actually, I would never have noticed this, but someone did point out to me that when Danny has like a flashback to being in a hospital, It's actually the same
Oh,
hospital that
From
Laura
Logan?
from Logan, was
Yeah.
in. I would never have noticed that because I've not seen. I mean, Logan was great, but I haven't seen it since theaters, so I would never have noticed that.
Yeah, I watched it. I like Logan quite a bit. Yeah, I've seen it a few times. So I don't think I was like, I wasn't super like, oh, I know exactly what scene this was from, but I had an inkling. I was like, oh, isn't this kind of seems like Logan, huh? And then I think during the credits I saw like, oh yeah, like clips from, furnished by that movie.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's funny because obviously we've had a lot to talk about because this movie has so much baggage with it that there was a lot
Yeah.
to discuss anyway. But this is typically the kind of movie that ends up being a difficult time to talk about because, I mean, okay, at least sometimes when a movie's dull, it's just dull and there's nothing else. At least here there was dull with potential, so that we can talk about all the things that could have been better, that could have been thingy. But often dull is harder to talk about than just bad, or obviously
sure.
good. And because and part of it's hard to, I think, in part because how do you define dullness? How do you say this is why this is dull? When you're saying okay something is good, you're like, okay, here's these reasons why it's good. Here's why this thing doesn't work. Here's these reasons why it doesn't work. When you've got something that's kind of ticking some of the boxes but is just really boring and like slow moving, it's like, okay, digging into why that is difficult and arguably, ironically, a duller conversation because you just start talking about, well, there's lack of momentum and like, character motivation doesn't lead to character motivation B and C and D. This doesn't propel because that doesn't propel. The villain doesn't work, which in this case she doesn't. So it's frustrating. It's a frustrating conversation. It's a frustrating movie. Not that it's super frustrating to watch. It's just a little bit dull to watch. Sadly, that's what it comes down to. There's some nice ideas. There's a lot of potential in the concept, but it's just a bit dull.
Yeah. And it is a shame because like you said, there's a lot of instances where you see the potential. I think like especially, and I imagine well, probably most people that watch this would agree, but like I think Anna Taylor-Joy as Magic was like a really standout character. Like, that was someone that definitely like, oh man, I want to see more of her, and like especially when she's fighting is really cool, and like. Yeah, like when she's going into the limbo dimension and like Lockheed the pet dragon like comes to life and stuff, which one thing I was kind of curious about that is cuz Lockheed was always Kitty Pryde's like pet dragon. I wonder, I'm not sure if there was if they're associated together in the comics, but like it looked really cool when it was like coming to life and fighting and stuff. So it sucks that there are like cool things in here and potential, and then ultimately though what you get is just kind of a dull letdown. But it's definitely not like the train wreck that I feel like a lot of people are saying. Like when it was first coming out, I feel like just on Twitter and stuff there are a lot of reviews just saying like, oh, like one of the worst X-Men movies yet, like so bad. It's like, no, it's definitely not like bad. It's just it's just like it's very average, very middling, dull, kind of bland.
It's actually kind of weird that in a way I'm glad that it's not great, just because I would be pissed if I wanted more, because
that's true.
There's never going to be any more. Because I mean the things that are going to be sad, like I think Anna Taylor-Joy as Magic is the sort of thing where it's a shame that she can't continue in that role, because they're probably going to want to reset everything and not take anyone. There was a chance they might have continued things. Apparently Kevin Feige did talk to Patrick Stewart about coming back as Xavier at one point, like early on. And Xavier said no, like Logan was the perfect goodbye. So I feel like if they can't get Patrick Stewart, then they're not going to take anyone. They're just going to be like, nope, our mutants are completely new and fresh and different, and go from there.
They'll do a new Marvel X-Men movie, and then they'll run out of ideas, and they'll bring everything back in like one giant disaster of a movie.
Yeah, we'll do like a Secret Wars thing where everyone crosses over, and they pay Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. like a shitload of money to come back as alternate versions of themselves, and Robert Downey Jr. by that point will be like 70 with a walking stick and barely move, and I know it'll be this. Yeah, I feel like we'll probably get our first Marvel X-Men movie maybe like 2024, 2025, something like that.
It's so hard to say now because of everything going on.
Yeah,
like,
true. Yeah.
with everything being delayed, but I'm sure they had probably like some something planned like in the relative future, but yeah, I don't know if it'll
Well, they've announced Fantastic
be
Four, so I
wayside.
assume Fantastic Four is
That's
coming
true, yeah.
first. I assume that's going to be quicker. I expect that and Blade before their X-Men movies start, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll fast track an X-Men movie if they've got an idea. But
Yeah.
it almost feels that they need someone else to just cover the X-Men movies like Feige does with everything else, because there's so many goddamn characters.
Yeah.
Depending on what they want to do. I kind of hope it's more classical, though. I hope, Cyclops is treated with some respect because he's been a chump in all the movies. Like, maybe don't use Wolverine for a couple of movies. I think that'd be kind of nice, honestly.
Yeah, like I really do love Wolverine, but yeah, like it'd be nice to, maybe if you want to do like a solo movie with him like first, but yeah, like at least don't need him as like the star of the X-Men right away. But
yeah,
it definitely would be nice to get some characters some time to shine, especially like maybe some different bad guys. Like I'd love to not really see Magneto for a bit because he was a bad guy in every X-Men movie. But yeah, I mean, who knows?
Who knows? But hey, not that a lot of you care about this part of the conversation, because this is just talking about X-Men movies now, because we're here for a horror movie podcast. And I think we've pretty much exhausted what we want to say about Mutants.
I did have a quick question because I wasn't sure if I missed something, but what the hell was the deal with Illyana's fear things? Like, because I understand they're like weird creepy things, but then I missed.
There's a couple of hints of it earlier on where she has like these images of the smiley men, like the smiley face men. It sounds like something she was told, like a story she was told as a kid or something like that. I wonder if maybe this was also like maybe some sequel stuff that they were going to get into. It's like, what are these things she's scared of? Yeah, like we're going, they're going to be the villains in the second movie because.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I missed something or if they did explain them, because I think that was part of one of those things where I was like, okay, are these real things that like tormented her as a child, or were they like a weird fear that she made up that is now manifesting? And yeah. Like you said, like they do have like a cool design. They're a bit too CGI, but like they do look cool.
Yeah. I will admit though, I kind of liked it when it first popped up. I was a little disappointed there was more than one. I felt like having multiples of them made it feel a little less special. I think just having one of these creepy bastards walking around was slightly cooler. But hey, whatever. But that's what kind of made the comparison to the gentleman on Buffy feel a bit more connected though, because
makes sense
because there was multiple gentlemen. So
and people always forget with the gentleman that it wasn't just them. Like, didn't they have like those weird like little sidekicks and straitjackets?
Yeah. There was like the henchmen, sort of crazy ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought those were creepy too. Not as creepy as a gentleman, but
yeah, kind of like they're the Renfields if they're like
exactly
the Draculas. Yeah. So, I guess we should rate the movie though. Then Tim, what are you going to give New Mutants?
I think I'm gonna go right down the middle and just give it a 5. Yeah, because it is just kind of like, it's not good, but it's not like that bad. I think it was a little dull and bland, but it is easy enough to watch. Like when you say, like, there's a difference between being dull and being boring. Like, I wasn't bored while watching it, but I would say that, I mean, maybe rewatching it maybe might be a little boring, but the first time I was watching it, like, I was still interested and wanted to see what was going on, so I wasn't necessarily bored, but you could definitely kind of feel like the blandness and everything. But there were a few cool moments and some potential and some performances that I like. So I can't go like too low and say it's bad, but not good either. So just straight down the middle, 5.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same ballpark. I might go a smudge high. I might go 5.5, just because there's enough potential and ideas that I like that I kind of like want to be nicer to it a little bit. And this is not because there was some Buffy references. I'll just make that clear before anyone says it. Just because I do like some things in the third act, and I do see potential in some of the moments and some of the ideas. So I'll maybe nudge it. I mean, admittedly, if I have to round it to a full number, I'll definitely say 5 rather than 6. But we do 0.5s here, so I'll say 5.5. On Letterboxd, it'll be just 5 out of 10 because you can't do halves. It's 5 stars. You can do half stars, but I think of that as out of 10. So
Yeah.
But anyway, so point being, 5.5. So there you go. That's New Mutants. Something we felt we should get to. One of the more notable movies that came out last year. So,
I mean, I was like, I mean, despite everything, I was still interested in seeing it. Like, even though I didn't think it was necessarily going to be good, there was definitely a curiosity there.
Yeah, curiosity for sure. So, there you go. That's New Mutants. If you made it this far into the review, you can put the word "gentleman" into the comments to let us know you got here. Tim's going to pose for the thumbnail, so here he goes. 3, 2, 1, pose. Demented,
Sure.
as per usual, Tim. That's what I like to see. So I'm just glancing at the user reviews
Okay.
on IMDb. What's funny about this is that we did a bonus movie on the Ace just last week, and the user reviews, there was only like 7 of them because the movie was that obscure. This movie only came out last August and has 979.
Jeez.
Yeah. The one that it recommends, the one that it shows me before clicking see more, is titled 67 million for this crap. For this amount of money, we could have shot 100 movies and at least 5 of them would have been great. I mean,
What?
100.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's maybe a bit of a stretch. 10. Like, you could shoot 10 movies for that. Low budget movies.
I trust this guy's knowledge of Hollywood budgetry.
So the economics, yes. No, I mean, I'm not going to really go into more of these because it's just, there's a lot of bad reviews. Of course, there is.
I don't understand these people that are like saying it's that bad. Like, to me, it's kind of like, what did you expect and what did you want? Like, to me, it seems like a very typical like comic book movie. Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is just that kind of internet mentality where everything is either the worst or the best. Like, there's no middle ground. Like, I don't know.
Yes, that's 1 out of 10 review from Pacau. Lame makes Batman and Robin and Batman Forever look like masterpiece.
Jeez, come on, that's
It's a stretch. It's a stretch. But
I don't trust any of these people.
yes. There's a lot of 1 out of 10s here. People like to go for the extremes. But hey, there you go. That's the New Mutants. You can, of course, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments if you've seen it below. Please do like and subscribe and go to patreon.com/mailfuzztv as we mentioned earlier. All those things do support us, so please do consider any one of them, if not all of them. They're all great options. You can, of course, get us on Twitter at Screams Midnight for updates and shenanigans and whatever Tim posts on there from time to time. Silly stuff. But yes, that is us. That is Screams After Midnight. So thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next time. Keep watching scary movies. Goodbye.